Hey Steelers Nation, welcome back. Today we're diving into the latest developments around the Pittsburgh Steelers and the head coaching search that has everyone talking. There's a lot of movement, a lot of names being floated, and the pressure is definitely on because the regular season is inching closer and closer. And as Mike Tomlin used to say, the road is getting narrow. That feeling is real right now because there's only so much time left to find the right person to lead this franchise into the next era. So here's where things stand. There have been 7 candidates interviewed so far, and all of them were done virtually. 2 of those were offensive coaches, with Nate Schilhas from the Rams as the passing game coordinator and Clay Kubik, the offensive coordinator from the 49ers. The rest of the group has been defensive minds, all proven coordinators. From around the league, we've got Ejiro Aya from the Panthers, Jesse Minter from the Chargers, Chris Shula from the Rams, Anthony Weaver from the Dolphins, and Jeff Hafley from the Packers. That's the list as it stood. But of course the landscape changed pretty quickly when Hafley was hired as the Dolphins head coach, which reshuffled the count and narrowed the field again. Now, keeping up with all this can feel like a full-time job because the Steelers have been methodical in their approach. Technically speaking, there are still 8 candidates left in the process. That number comes from the 7 virtual interviews, minus Hafley now that he has a job, plus Brian Flores, who is expected to have his first in-person interview this week. There have been conflicting reports about whether this is his first interview, but the latest information suggests it is. The other in-person interview on the calendar is with Mike McCarthy, and he will be meeting with the team face-to-face. The only other known candidate from the initial list who will be coming to the South Side for an in-person meeting is Anthony Weaver, the Dolphins' defensive coordinator. What makes this situation even more intriguing is how many teams around the league are still searching for their own head coach. At one point, the number of teams in the market was massive, but several of those vacancies have now been filled. John Harbaugh is headed to the Giants, Kevin Stefanski to the Falcons, and Robert Saleh accepted the job in Nashville, which many people have described as a high-pressure role that leaves 6 teams still looking. And that number is worth emphasizing because it shows how crowded the coaching market still is. Even this late in the cycle, the teams still in search include the Ravens and Browns within the division, the Raiders, the Cardinals, and now the Bills, who have decided to move on from Sean McDermott. Naturally, the question everyone wants answered is, who's the favorite? Who will get the job? Who would be the biggest surprise? And who would make the biggest splash? The truth is, none of that can be known with certainty yet. The Steelers have not even sat down in the same room with Art Rooney and Omar Khan, the 2 decision makers the organization has identified as the ones who will ultimately choose the next head coach. So while we can speculate and analyze, the reality is that the final decision is still a few steps away. But I do want to share what I genuinely like about the process so far. First, there is a mix of candidates that suggests the Steelers are not approaching this with a rigid template. They are being open-minded, which is something that has worked for them before. Rooney himself mentioned how they found Mike Tomlin in the first place. He said they did not expect Tomlin to get the job, but they kept talking to him. And the more they spoke with him, the more they liked him. Eventually, he got the job. And a year later, they were in the Super Bowl. Almost 2 decades later, the organization is finally ready to move on. And it is encouraging to see that the search is being handled with that same openness. I also like that offensive coaches are on the list. That does not mean I am rooting against a defensive candidate or that I would be upset if the Steelers hired someone from the defensive side. What it means is that the organization needs a shakeup, and in the year 2026, it would be refreshing to see the Steelers put more emphasis on offense. At least as much as the process allows, the league is evolving, and the Steelers need to evolve with it. Having offensive minds in the conversation is a sign that they might be ready to take that step. Another thing I like is that the Steelers have not limited themselves to a specific age range. It is not just about Mike McCarthy being in his 60s. It is also about Nate Schilhas being in his mid-30s. That kind of range shows the organization is willing to consider both experience and potential. When you look at the original list of candidates, most of them were under their mid-40s. And then McCarthy shows up, which changes the dynamic. Are they being respectful to McCarthy? Are they really considering him as a frontrunner? Those are questions we will have to wait to see answered. Rooney also set the tone for this search with a very simple answer when asked what he was looking for. He said leadership. He did not hide behind a flashy response or say something designed to excite the fan base. He was clear. He wants someone who can run football. And if you dig into the backgrounds of these candidates, many of them have the kind of leadership traits that fit that requirement. Chris Shula, in particular, stands out as someone who embodies that leadership presence, but he is not alone. There are others in this group who bring that same kind of confidence and authority. Finally, I appreciate that Rooney and Khan appear willing to wait on the Rams. The playoff picture is narrowing, and there are only 4 teams left competing in the conference championships. Of those, the Rams are the only team that still has candidates in the Steelers' mix, namely Shilhas and Shula. If the Rams were to upset the Seahawks and advance, both of those coaches could still come in for in-person interviews in the week between the conference championships and the Super Bowl. That extra week could be crucial, and it suggests the Steelers are not rushing this decision. They can use this time to meet with other candidates in person, but they also have the option to wait for the Rams to finish their playoff run, and I have to say, there is something about those 2 Rams candidates that makes them feel like the class of the group. I have read more about them than some others, and it is not just hype. They have a track record that stands out, and their names keep coming up because they bring a unique blend of offensive creativity and leadership. But again, I am not saying they are the only ones worth considering. The overall group is strong, and taking a few extra days to evaluate everything is not going to hurt anybody. This is a process that deserves patience, and it feels like the Steelers are treating it that way as we keep tracking this head coaching search. There's another layer to consider, and it's the history of how the Steelers have approached long-term coaching stability. It's not just about who they pick, but also about what kind of tenure that coach might have. The question was raised in a fan query, asking whether the Steelers' head coaching position is essentially a lifetime appointment by design, or if Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, and Mike Tomlin earned their long leashes through early success. The answer is not one size fits all, and each of those cases is different for a reason. Chuck Noll's situation is the first one to examine. When he was hired, the Steelers franchise was not in a good place. It was hard to imagine anyone coming in and having a long-term future, given how rough things had been for years. Noll was only 37 when he took over, and he stayed in the job until he was 59, stepping down in December of 1991. That's a 23-year tenure, which is almost unheard of in modern football. But it also came at a time when coaches were not expected to work forever, and Noll's time in Pittsburgh really did feel like a lifetime commitment. He was so influential that it shaped the franchise identity for decades. Bill Cowher's path was different. He came in after Noll, and many people viewed it as a nearly impossible assignment, given the standard that had been set. But Cowher didn't enter the job with the idea that he would coach for 2 decades. He was seen as a strong personality, someone with a distinct Pittsburgh identity, and he made it his own. He didn't just inherit a legacy, he built his own. The conversation around him wasn't about how long he would last, but about how close he was to breaking through to the Super Bowl. He had a style that was uniquely his, and because he was so effective at keeping the team competitive, the organization kept giving him opportunities. Cowher did eventually get to the Super Bowl in 2005, and after 15 seasons he stepped down. He was 34 when he started and was out of coaching before he turned 50. Like Noll, he never coached again after leaving the Steelers. His tenure is a reminder that long-term success doesn't always look the same. Sometimes it is about enduring stability, and sometimes it is about a strong run with a clear identity and a big goal. That keeps the team invested. Then came Mike Tomlin, who has been the face of the franchise for nearly 2 decades. From the moment he arrived, there was a sense that he was not just a placeholder or a short-term solution. He was young, but he brought a level of confidence and energy that made it clear he could be a long-term leader. And even early in his tenure, people were talking about how the Steelers had only had 3 head coaches since 1969. That kind of continuity is rare in the NFL, and it has been a point of pride for Steelers fans. But it also raises the question, was that stability by design? Or was it simply the result of the coaches proving themselves over time? The answer, I believe, is that it is not something that can be planned in advance. You cannot simply say you want a coach to last 20 years. You can hope for it, but what matters is whether the coach earns it. In Tomlin's case, it was clear from the beginning that he had the kind of presence that could sustain a long tenure. Rooney has shared the story of how Tomlin came into the room and blew everyone away. And that kind of first impression matters when you are looking for a leader. who can guide a franchise for years. So what does all of that mean for the next head coach? It means that the Steelers are not necessarily looking for a lifetime appointment, but they are looking for someone who can earn that kind of trust. When you look at the ages of the candidates, you see a wide range. Most of the initial list were relatively young, under their mid-40s, and then Mike McCarthy appears on the list, which introduces a different kind of candidate. It raises questions about whether the Steelers are simply being respectful to a veteran coach, or whether they truly see him as a leading option. The reality is that this is a fascinating time for the organization. The rest of this month will be filled with speculation, interviews, and more analysis. But I truly believe the process will not drag on forever. The Steelers are likely waiting on the Rams, and that could be the key to understanding the timing. The Rams still have candidates in the mix, and their playoff run could determine how soon the Steelers feel ready to make a decision. It's not just about finding the right coach, it's also about timing, opportunity, and making sure you have the full picture before pulling the trigger. Now, let's talk about the bigger picture. The Steelers are not operating in a vacuum. The coaching market is a crowded one, and the decisions of other teams affect who is available and when. With several vacancies filled, the remaining teams still searching are competing for the same pool of talent. That makes it even more important for the Steelers to move thoughtfully. You do not want to rush and end up with a coach who is not the right fit, just because you felt pressure to get it done quickly. And that brings us back to the concept of leadership. Art Rooney said it plainly: leadership is what he is looking for. That's not a vague statement. It means someone who can run a football team, manage personalities, handle the pressure of a passionate fan base, and guide a roster through the ups and downs of an NFL season. It means someone who can command respect in the building and keep everyone aligned toward a common goal. When you think about that, it becomes clear why the Steelers are taking their time. They are not just hiring a coach. They are selecting the next architect of the franchise's identity. There are a few candidates who clearly fit that profile, and I have to say, some of them feel like they could be the kind of coach the Steelers have been searching for years. But the important thing is that the process has been broad enough to allow for multiple styles and philosophies, whether the next coach comes from the offensive side or the defensive side, whether they are young or experienced. The key will be whether they can lead. The Steelers have a culture of toughness, discipline, and competitiveness, and the next coach must be able to maintain that while also pushing the team forward. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and hit the like button on this video. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. What began as a quiet murmur inside league circles has grown into a full-blown buzz around Pittsburgh. Aaron Rodgers is expected to remain with the Steelers through 2026. While no podium speeches or celebratory announcements have echoed through the facility, multiple signs point to a long-term plan already sketched behind closed doors. Officially, the organization keeps its tone measured. Unofficially, the message circulating among agents, scouts, and rival executives is that the decision has been made. Rodgers' arrival in Pittsburgh was never framed as a short-term experiment. From the start, the Steelers appeared interested not only in his arm talent, but in the institutional weight he brings to a locker room. Sources close to the situation suggest that team leadership views Rodgers as a bridge between eras, a quarterback capable of stabilizing the present while shaping the future. The idea of continuity, rather than a brief cameo, has become central to the internal narrative. Speculation intensified after subtle moves within the organization hinted at long-range thinking, personnel decisions, schematic patience, and the way young offensive players are being developed all suggest a roadmap that assumes Rodgers' presence beyond a single season. The quarterback himself has fueled the whispers with carefully chosen words, praising the culture, the city, and the competitive edge he feels in Pittsburgh, without explicitly committing on record. Round the league, the reaction is a mix of skepticism and intrigue. Some wonder about longevity and physical demands, while others believe the Steelers are betting on experience and football IQ over raw timelines. What seems clear is that Pittsburgh is comfortable with its gamble by anchoring its vision around Rodgers through 2026. The franchise signals confidence not just in the player, but in a philosophy that values leadership and control at the game's most critical position. Until ink meets paper publicly, the story will live in the realm of rumor. Yet in NFL circles, This is one of those rumors that feels less like speculation and more like an open secret waiting for the right moment to be acknowledged. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Pittsburgh Steelers, make sure to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and give this video a like. We always look forward to hearing your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.